Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and Apple released iOS 26.6 Beta 1 to developers and public beta testers a few days ago, and iOS 26.5 released to the public about 3 weeks ago. But there's even more to talk about since the iOS 26.6 Beta 1 is out what's new video. We'll talk about the latest Apple news, we'll also talk about new features, and we'll talk about the overall experience. Not just my experience, but your experience based off the YouTube community poll on the post page, where at the time of this video there's over 8,800 votes and 132 comments. I've gone over all the comments to determine what the updates are like for most of us, so be sure to stick around toward the end of the video where I'll read some of your comments as well. Now, Apple added a new state this week to its digital driver's license option within Apple Wallet. Within your Apple Wallet, if you go to driver's licenses and ID cards, when you go to add a card, you'll see a new option for Arkansas. This is something that was recently added, but this is up to the state or the different country, not up to Apple. They have to work directly with Apple to get this implemented. So that's why we don't see it everywhere, and it also appears that Virginia will soon be adding the digital ID options to Apple Wallet, and this is according to Mac Rumors. So we could see more options very soon. Not everyone wants this, but many people have the option depending on where you live currently. Apple has started preparing its student discounts again in the United States and Canada, according to code found by Mac Rumors. Every year, Apple gives student discounts. They're paired with different things, such as a free gift card or accessories like AirPods, and we should see these updated soon. So it won't just be the typical education store discount that you can see here, but then also some additional benefits. So this is something they roll out every year, but now you actually have to verify that you're a student or actually a teacher. So just make sure that you fit those credentials, and then you'll be eligible for those updates when they're available. If you're someone that regularly uses the Apple Watch just to track your health, work out, or earn badges, Apple has a new activity award for Apple Watch that you can earn on June 3rd this year. But this time around, it will take a lot more effort than usual. To celebrate Global Running Day, you can actually earn the badge by running at least a 5K or 3.1 mile workout. You can see the details here on Mac Rumors where it says Earn a Running Day Apple Watch Activity Award on June 3rd with the different running activity awards here. So that's something that's available, but again, you'll have to run at least a 5K it seems. Apple recently updated Creator Studio with an all-new plan and redesigned app icons for all of the included apps. Many, including myself, were quite critical of the app icon designs, as some don't make as much sense or look so different that it was hard to understand what the app was that we're looking at. Apple seemingly has realized this and now published a support document explaining which app is representing which app, or which app has been updated. You can see it here where it's a specific support update document that says Identify Apple Creator Studio apps on your Mac. So this definitely represents that there's an issue here, as I mentioned before, where some of these make sense, Final Cut Pro, Logic Pro maybe, but some of them just don't look like they represent what you would think. So Pixelmator Pro, I get what they were trying to do, but I think the previous one was much nicer. So maybe we'll see an update for these in the near future. Also, one other thing I wanted to mention is there's a short outage going on right now for Apple Music. Now, depending on when you're watching this, it could be resolved, but if you were having issues from Friday into Saturday, that's why. So there's an Apple Music outage, and you can always just search for Apple System Status page, and you'll see this page here. As far as new features this week, iOS 26.6 will alert you once you have too many blocked contacts. I mentioned this in the What's New video. However, some had speculated it was as many as 8,000 to 20,000 blocked contacts that would trigger the alert. But some who have looked through the code claim that it is 3,000 blocked contacts instead. So specifically what that means is if we go into our settings, within phone settings, you have blocked contacts, and under here is where those blocked contacts reside. So if you have over 3,000, you may see an alert with iOS 26.6 that's as much as you can do. Maybe they'll increase the amount in future updates, but we just don't know at this point. Now, we're just over a week away from seeing iOS 27 for the first time at WWDC 2026. That takes place on June 8th, and we'll see the keynote at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can watch that on YouTube or Apple's website and many other places as well. So we'll be able to see all of those features, and of course we saw the first features like they show every year with accessibility features. They showcase those, but recently Siri features have leaked as well. I had a separate video covering that, but it seems there's hope now that it seems the leaked features are at least far less than previous years, with the focus being stability and battery if the information is correct. So I really hope to see this, as it definitely is something that iOS 26 needs desperately. It also seems that Apple's new Siri features will focus on being on device rather than being off device or needing to access servers all the time. Of course, some of those features will need to access external data to gather that information, but hopefully much of it is on device, and this would help differentiate it between things such as Google Gemini on, say, a Samsung device or a Google Pixel. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what that means, but we've seen some of the leaks as far as what it looks like with different Siri updates and more. Apple is also working on a new anti-theft feature that would sense when someone quickly grabs your phone away from you, and then it can automatically lock the phone. This would make it much harder for someone to steal the phone while it's unlocked and then start to use it, gaining access to all of your information. So this is great news. We've seen this on things such as Pixel devices, so to add it to iPhone using the accelerometer seems to make sense, and hopefully we'll see that with either iOS 26.6 or iOS 27. When it comes to security updates, Apple has updated some existing ones that were already there. On Apple's security release website, 9to5Mac actually noticed that they updated some old releases. They gave additional detail to the CVE numbers. So typically when you go in and take a look at something that's been patched, you can see all of the different things with iOS 26.5, for example, such as core animation, where it has the impact, description, and CVE number. Apple apparently updated things such as iOS 18.7, iPadOS 18.7, and others with additional information with iPhone security, iPad security, and much more. So if you're someone that's been regularly using them and you want to see more information, be sure to check it out, or there's new updates on many of the different features as far as the security patches go, with many different versions now. This is typically to allow Apple to patch them, then they can update them later, maybe seeing if there were any issues or vulnerabilities that still remain. So it's great to see that they're still updating this. Now, I wanted to give a weekly iOS tip again, but this is something that I've shown before in many of my videos, but I keep getting questions about how I did this. So if we go into music, for example, pull down from the control center, go into app settings, this will automatically jump you right into the settings for that specific app that you're in. This works in any specific app, so maybe we want to go into the developer app. Again, go in here, go to app settings, and if there's settings for it, it will jump right to those settings of that specific app. So I'll link that shortcut in the description. With the launch of the iPhone 17 Pro models this year, Apple switched back to aluminum or aluminium for the material due to its thermal properties. There was a rumor that Apple could go back to titanium or maybe a new liquid metal alloy design, but a leaker Fixed Focus Digital on Weibo has said that thanks to the aluminum's thermal properties, it's the only practical option for now, and don't expect them to switch anytime soon. So I don't think we'll see a move away from aluminum anytime soon, unless maybe it's with the 20th anniversary iPhone, where maybe it features something completely different with a glass design or more. But at this point, it looks like it's here to stay. It's been used for years in the past without any issue, but titanium and stainless steel were definitely nicer materials. When it comes to releases this week, while AirTags were updated to version 3.0.49, it was released last Tuesday by Apple, and that's up from version 3.0.45. It updates completely on its own schedule it seems, but you can find that within Find My. And if you just tap on Find My, go to your items, and then select one, tap on the address at the top, you'll see the firmware there. But again, it updates on its own. As far as other releases, while many of us were expecting iOS 26.5.1 to release to the public, at this point I would expect it next week. That gives us a week before WWDC 2026, so I would expect it as soon as maybe Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. We don't have a specific date, but MacRumors has seen it in their analytics, and I would expect it very soon. We could also see an iOS 26.6 Beta 2 as soon as maybe Monday of next week, but again, we don't have a specific date from Apple. If we don't see it Monday, we may not see another update until after WWDC, maybe on the 15th. Apple typically gets very busy, and then of course on the 8th after WWDC's keynote, we'll see iOS 27 Beta 1 typically for the first time. We'll have concurrent betas with iOS 27 and iOS 26.6, maybe even iOS 26.7 betas, all the way through the summer, with a public release of iOS 27 usually in mid-September around the iPhone 18 launch. So that's what we can expect as far as updates, and of course we really don't have a schedule just yet, but we'll probably have a public beta of iOS 27 in July. When it comes to the overall experience this week, well, let's start with AirPods Pro 3. AirPods Pro 3 have been better for me this week, which is a bit odd since I had a lot of issues with iOS 26.5, but it seems like it's behaving a lot better on iOS 26.6. So many of you are still having issues with connectivity, and this seems to carry across a few other things we'll talk about in a moment, but there's definitely some ongoing issues here where people are having issues with it and just seems to be problematic. When it comes to iOS 18.7.9, there's not a whole lot to talk about as many people aren't updated to it. So as far as iOS 18.7.9 goes, many people are on iOS 18.7.8 as Apple has not pushed the update to devices that support iOS 26. They definitely should because of all of the security updates, but at this point they're not doing that. When it comes to the iOS 26.5 experience, well, it seems like it's getting worse. It's unacceptable at this point and definitely unexpected as it was pretty good when it first came out, but after the first 2 to 3 weeks, it's gotten much worse. There are some things that are fixed, for example, such as the iCloud backups are working properly again. It's very smooth for some people, but very laggy for others. In fact, it was very laggy for me on my main device, and it seems like it's okay right now, but typically the lag exists when you lock it, unlock it, and then swipe. It's very laggy. You can see that right there on this iPhone 17 Pro Max. So if we try that again, swipe up, swipe over, now it's fast. So again, if we go into settings, we'll go down to General and then Software Update. So you'll see we're on iOS 26.5 here, and both of them behave quite a bit differently. So if we lock it, again, unlock, scroll over, it's fine. It's fine on the iPhone Air. Again, if we lock it and scroll over, it's very hit or miss and very device dependent. We don't know why this is happening, but there's definitely some issues here. Of course, the keyboard is once again lagging, and some are saying that they're having mistypes like they did before Apple patched it a few updates ago. So some ongoing issues with the keyboard there. There's also poor RAM management, opening apps, closing them. It's not staying in memory that long. So again, we'll go back in here, and it's staying here, but it seems like it happens more often, at least that it closes it in the background with third-party apps. Also, Apple CarPlay connectivity is dropping out for many, including myself. I'm seeing this over and over. So if I'm connecting it to my car, typically it will disconnect right away and then reconnect. This time around, maybe every 20 minutes it will disconnect again. Sometimes it's random, sometimes it's not. It's in the middle of navigating. It seems to be very hit or miss, and this goes along with the AirPods issue I mentioned earlier. Also, there's some odd visual bugs and messages for some people that they're mentioning, and some apps completely disappear until you reboot. I saw this on the iPad myself, but I've seen others mention it where maybe some of their icons will just disappear, and then they go away, you reboot, and they come back. I've also seen it on macOS, so definitely some odd issues going on now that we're a few weeks into iOS 26.5. You would think that indexing and all of those things would have fixed the issues by now, but it's still seemingly an issue. So lots of issues that I really wish they would resolve, and we really need iOS 26.5.1 to fix those. Now with iOS 26.6 Beta 1, I've been using it full time on my 17 Pro Max on my main phone, and it has improved fluidity even on older phones, such as the iPhone 11 for many. However, I still see lag from time to time. It just depends on the day. You'll see there was a little bit of lag, not as severe as iOS 26.5, but definitely a little laggy for some. You'll see here as I go through, even if I scroll, ProMotion looks okay, but things aren't loaded properly. There's some odd bugs all over the place for me. A hard reboot doesn't seem to fix it for me. I've tried that over and over, and it seems like ProMotion, just everything is a little bit odd. You'll see how slow and laggy it is, and even if we go in back to battery here, so we'll go all the way up, and we'll go to battery and then battery mode. I'm on adaptive. If I turn that off, I don't notice too much of a difference. Again, there it lagged again. So no real changes there for me. Many of you say it's much faster though. Also, many report their device is running much cooler. We'll talk about heat in just a moment, but I'm seeing the same thing. Also, the widget crash bug is not resolved. So if we go into our widgets here, press and hold, then tap on a widget. It has to be maybe this size widget. Tap out of the widget, tap on the 4 dots here, and now it's doing nothing. Let's try it again. Tap, tap out, tap on the dots, and it resprings. So every single time this is repeatable for me. Swipe up, again, go back over, press and hold, tap on one of these widgets, tap out, tap the dots, and it resprings over and over. So some people have said they can't replicate this, but try it with the weather widget, see if it happens on this specific size widget. I've reported it in feedback, and hopefully it's resolved with the next update. Now also Apple CarPlay disconnects are pretty bad for me as well in 26.6. I'm seeing no difference there, but I am seeing improved AirPods connectivity. Some have also said they have audio issues where morning alarms and YouTube videos will randomly play back at double speed. So we're seeing that over and over. And also sometimes shortcuts are not working properly when trying to maybe run one of them. So you go into a shortcut, try and run one, and it just doesn't run properly at all. So these are the things we're hearing with iOS 26.6. Again, you'll see the lag. That's the #1 complaint. However, it does have good battery life, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. When it comes to overall heat and thermals, well, like people said before, and I mentioned before, iOS 26.6 is much cooler this time around than 26.5. It doesn't randomly heat up like it's processing in the background, but let's go ahead and run benchmarks on both versions and see what we get here this time around and see what the thermals are like on both. So we'll go in, run benchmarks, and let's take a look. If we take a look at thermals on the iPhone 17 Pro Max running iOS 26.6 Beta 1, we're right around 36 degrees Celsius, and on the 17 Pro Max running iOS 26.5, we're actually a little bit cooler this time around 34 degrees Celsius. Maybe that's because it's not my main phone, it's not running cellular. That's typically what I see when you don't have a cellular plan enabled on that device. As far as benchmarks go, iOS 26.5 is on the left, iOS 26.6 Beta 1 is on the right. We have a little bit lower scores, maybe due to it being a beta with some other things going on in the background, but we have 3,794 for single core compared to 3,876 on the public version. Then again, multi-core is 9,770 compared to 9,981. It's well within the margin of error, but definitely could see an improvement by the time it's released to the public. When it comes to battery life, let's first take a look at iOS 26.5. With iOS 26.5 on an iPhone 17 Pro Max, thanks to Cameron for sending in this battery life, he only had 3 hours and 36 minutes of screen active time, 51 minutes of screen idle time using 46% of the battery. We've seen him get as much as maybe 12 hours of screen on time, so this is actually pretty poor. I have seen some better numbers depending on whose phone you look at and what they're doing, but that's not so great. With iOS 26.6 Beta 1, let's take a look at my battery. We'll go to battery health. You'll see I'm at 100% with 95 cycles. And if we take a look at usage, yesterday I had 3 hours and 26 minutes of screen active time, 4 hours and 53 minutes of screen idle time, and used 75% of the battery. It's gotten a little bit better, 2 hours and 27 minutes using 32%, but again, not the 10 to 12 hours we would expect. So hopefully it improves, but this is an improvement from before for me where he had 39% usage with just an hour and a half of screen active time. So definitely could see some improvement, and we're seeing an improvement with 26.6. Now for all of you, based on the comments, 76% of those on iOS 26.5 have said that they've had poor or bad battery life compared to iOS 26.4.2. 88% though on iOS 26.6 say that they're having good or improved battery life compared to iOS 26.5. So most are saying it's much better on the beta. So if you're wondering if you should install iOS 26.6 Beta 1, well at this point I would say probably not yet, but you definitely could try it out if you have a backup device or you just know that you have a backup and if you need to restore you can use a computer. But it does seem to have better battery, but it still has some issues. However, if you want iOS 26.5.1, I probably wouldn't install this update as you'll have to use a computer to downgrade with 26.6 going to an older version. However, you should be able to try out iOS 27 Beta 1 once it releases, so upgrading any version that's ahead of it, you should be able to upgrade to on your phone. If it's below it, you'll need to downgrade with a computer. When it comes to overall storage, let's take a look at that. So under General and then iPhone Storage, if we scroll to the bottom, again on the left is iOS 26.5, 26.6 Beta 1 on the right. The overall size is very similar, 21.77 gigabytes compared to 22.12 gigabytes. So iOS is slightly larger, but that's pretty typical on an early beta. As far as system usage here or system data, again, this goes up and down. That's why it's buried. It's not something you should be checking, but it's well within what we would expect. It will go down to 1 gigabyte or below sometimes, and sometimes up to 60 gigabytes. Now, as far as the overall experience and what you had to say, let's go ahead and take a look at some of your comments. And you'll see we have both good and bad comments depending on who's using the device, but YadoVI0 said, never updating from 26.5. It's so stable and the battery lasts all day long. 16 hours of screen on time, no issues. Venom Skull 432 said, iOS 26.5 performance has gotten worse than what it was for me when I first installed it. I often experience lag when swiping through home screen pages. I am also experiencing battery drain at night on my 17 Pro as I never charge it at night. It's ridiculous that at this time of year iOS 26 feels so choppy. Devin Javier 7023 said, on my 16 Pro since updating to 26.5 seems to run significantly warmer and battery drain is very bad. We really need 26.5.1. HOR 7719 said, iOS 26.5 in my 17 Pro, always so laggy. I update to 26.6, smooth. Sanjay V. Menon says, hi Aaron, I'm on iOS 26.5 on my 14 Pro, and so far it's been good. There are some UI stutters and lag, sometimes, but still far better than the earlier versions versions of iOS 26. The battery life is decent for 82% battery health device. Looking forward to WWDC to see the improvements iOS 27 brings. Prabhav Sarathi F7Y said, 26.6 is way better in my opinion as it is more stable, and ever since I put on default iOS 18 wallpaper, my iPhone has performed even better, lagging little to no time on iPhone 13 Pro. Jay Muez says, hi Aaron, I'm on iOS 26.6 beta on iPhone 17 Pro. No issues so far and great battery life. Much better than 26.5 in my opinion. Alex R4581 said, I'm on iOS 26.6 beta 1 on my iPhone 16 Pro Max. Running so smoothly, not heat, and running on the iPad Pro M4 as well. So smooth, wonderful beta. Croy2001 said, iPhone 16e on 26.5, I'm just not seeing the battery drain issue everyone seems to be having. Performance overall seems fine. With iOS 18.7.9, there's going to be many holdouts at this point until iOS 26 is stable enough for them to use it day to day without worrying. So it seems like quite a few people are still staying on iOS 18, but more and more are moving over to iOS 26. With iOS 26.5, well, at this point, it's unacceptable and I would give it a D+. For a late-stage public update, iOS 26.5 is heavily missing the mark and frankly unacceptable at this late in the update cycle. It's plagued by some severe optimization flaws that heavily degrade the day-to-day user experience. The most critical issue is a massive, highly agreed-upon battery drain affecting over 76% of reporting users that pairs with sudden random overheating. Even during basic tasks like swiping through home pages, it seems to be slow and laggy. The software feels unpolished due to aggressive RAM management I mentioned before, and that randomly clears background apps and triggers home screen refreshes. Additionally, legacy bugs have returned with the keyboard input lag, and that's causing high typo rates. And communication handshakes are broken with Bluetooth and CarPlay, and it seems to go on and on. With iOS 26.6, I'll give it a B+, and it's a good step forward at this point. In a rare twist for early beta software, iOS 26.6 Developer Beta 1 is widely being received as the savior to the mess left by iOS 26.5. System fluidity for most is very snappy, and thermal management has taken a massive leap forward. So other than the thermals I showed you earlier based on not having cellular versus having cellular, it seems like a much better experience. An overwhelming 87.5% of reporting users note that battery life has significantly stabilized and devices are running drastically cooler during normal operation. The sluggish animations and heavy stutters that we see from time to time going in and out of apps seem to mostly be fixed, and it's just much better overall, especially on the iPhone 17 Pro and 16 Pro Max models. Because it's an initial developer beta though, it isn't without its typical flaws. CarPlay remains a severe issue like I mentioned with many disconnects, but if Apple can work out a few more bugs before the release, I think many could be happy with iOS 26 finally. So that's everything with iOS 26.5 and iOS 26.6 Beta 1. I really hope we see iOS 26.5.1 this week to resolve many of the issues we're having with iOS 26.5, and hopefully iOS 27 resolves all of these typical update bugs and fixes the problem from here forward. I'd love to hear from you how your experience is going with the current version and what you're using, and of course, as always, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.